Sasuke looked up into Kakashi's eye, the both of them deadly still. As the soft glow of Kakashi's healing faded, there wasn't any more reason for him to keep his hands on the sides of Sasuke's face. Kakashi thought he might as well tease his student a bit and began to stroke Sasuke's cheek with his right thumb ever so lightly, but to his surprise, Sasuke closed his eyes and leaned into Kakashi's right hand more. A ding from the microwave finally broke the two up, with both of them not willing to make eye contact. I'm going to watch some TV, Sasuke said, getting off the counter and walking towards the TV. After a while, Kakashi came to the lounge and dropped off both of their plates, then sat at his usual spot. However, Sasuke sat a bit further away, giving small glances to him, who seemed very interested in the show on TV right now. We still got the dinner with Mrs. Misono tomorrow, Sasuke stated, looking at Kakashi, in an attempt to draw his attention. It worked, as Kakashi suddenly looked frozen and with a deep sigh turned his attention back to Sasuke. The Uchiha didn't want to look away this time. He was no coward, or at least that's that he told himself. Yay, we do, don't we? Kakashi said, leaning back into his couch and putting his left hand under his chin. I can just tell her that you had somewhere to be and that you had to go, he said with a shrug, glancing back at Sasuke. So that means you want me to run away? He asked, a little annoyed, but Kakashi only replied with a shrug. An Uchiha doesn't run away from anything, plus Mrs. Miza, he was about to finish his rant, plus you owe me. But I can forget about that and you can go free. There it was again, for Sasuke having to owe someone and be indebted to them even if they didn't want anything back just didn't sit well with him. I said I'm going and that's what I'm going to do, he said with a low growl. Kakashi gave him a once over before another sigh and got up from his seat. He walked towards his room and returned a few seconds later with a bag in his hand. After sitting back on his spot with the bag in his lap, he looked over to Sasuke again before handing it over. Sasuke took it after giving him a quizzical look. After a glance at what was inside, he looked back at Kakashi. What is this? His voice came out almost cracked but laced with anger. But that didn't matter to Kakashi. Mrs. Misono said to get you better clothes, and I know she's a stickler for details, so I got you that. What are you finally backing out? Kakashi asked with some sarcastic optimism that only seemed to enrage the Uchiha more. Of course not, he said, staring at Kakashi with a menacing glare, and took out the object of his spite from the bag. It was a dark blue kimono with white leaf prints and linings all over it. This looks expensive, he said without really thinking. Not that expensive since I got it for free, Kakashi said, going back to his show. Sasuke settled back into the couch. Then one of the questions that had been bugging him all day found its way back into his head. Why do you still live here? He asked, not taking his attention off the TV. Not that he was watching, but more so that he didn't want to lose his nerve if Kakashi made eye contact. It was quiet. Too quiet, he realized, and a glance at Kakashi told him that maybe he shouldn't have asked that, because staring at him was the Shinobi with a cold glare that sent shivers down his spine, different from the previous ones of anxiousness but of fear. I'm sorry, he said before he could stop his lips from moving in an attempt at self-preservation. It's fine, came Kakashi's reply, but Sasuke could tell it was stressed, as if holding back. Where else am I supposed to go? Kakashi stated, seemingly not having finished the conversation Sasuke thought had ended. Anywhere else but here. Isn't it too painful? Sasuke asked, gripping the bag in his hands tighter, remembering his own memories. Kakashi let out a deep huff before sagging into the couch. If all I remember was only pain, I would want to strike out against this whole village. Sasuke threw the bag at Kakashi and he swiftly dodged it and caught it. That's such a bullshit excuse and you know it. This village has brought us nothing but pain, why not wipe it out? Kakashi shifted to sit next to Sasuke, and as the Uchiha looked up at him, the Shinobi gave him a hard flick on his forehead. Baka. Sasuke drew his left arm up to hold his forehead and swung his right at Kakashi, but that attack was easily held by his sensei. You have to look past the rage, past the grief, otherwise what's left at the end, you by yourself. In a casket, no matter how you slice it. Sasuke drew his hand back after some resistance from Kakashi. I think I'll turn in early today, he said, getting up to walk past Kakashi. He hated having these outbursts because it always showed how far behind Ichi that he truly was by not controlling his emotions. After reaching his room, he shut the door behind himself, kicking off his shoes and jumping straight into bed. Damn, I forgot the stupid kimono. Doesn't matter anyway. He tossed and turned the whole night, being plagued by dreams of him losing his whole team after a battle with Ichi. He woke up in a cold sweat, frantically looking around his room. He hated when he saw Ichi's swirling red eyes against a black backdrop, as if he was dropped into darkness, surrounded by peering eyes. His shoulders felt stiff and so did his back, and a glance outside told him it was morning. Had he really slept for that long? With an uneasy grunt, he dragged himself out of bed, already heading for his morning shower. As he opened his door, on the floor was a covered plate of food and the bag with the kimono inside. With a huff he walked over it, only grabbing the food before heading into the shower. Today for him, he didn't know what was wrong, but there was a looming sense of dread that hovered over him as he went to the lounge to watch TV. He gave the bag a passing glance as he went to the lounge and sat down. What's wrong with me today? He asked himself as he stood up to start doing random exercises and running through his katas, but the feeling of dread never left him as he kept training. Had it been the nightmare that he had before that had unsettled him so much? Hours passed and it was already midday and Kakashi was still not back, which started to unsettle Sasuke. This was very odd. He knew his sensei was lazy, but he also knew he was very punctual and a stickler for detail, a trait he definitely saw where he had got it from. He took out his phone, setting a quick call to Sakura. She picked up the phone and was immediately panicking and stumbling over her words, but he had no time for this. Sasuke. Sasuke, is that you? He let out a low groan. Yes, of course it's me. Who else would it be? Now I got to ask you something. She took a deep breath, one so loud he could hear it on the phone. No. Okay, what is it? How could he ask where Kakashi was without sounding suspicious? Do we have training or a mission today? Because I can't seem to find Kakashi. No, we don't have anything today, but Shikamaru said something must be going on because he saw some Anbu and Shinobi heading into the forest today. He cut the call before she had time to add any more info. So that's where he went? Sasuke went back to his room, packing some of his gear and then stopping before he could leave. He looked down at his own clothes. This was a dead giveaway, so he ventured into a Kakashi's armory and a side room. After getting some combat pants and clothes and one of Kakashi's flak jackets, he stepped outside ready to go do some damage. He walked out and soon was beyond the fence around the house. Miss Sasuke, he heard shouting from behind him walking down the street. He turned around and caught sight of the four Genins that he had met the day. Sasuke looked to his right, then back at the four Genins. It's better to just maintain this cover, so he waited until they caught up to him. Hey Miss Sasuke. Maiko ran up, being the first to greet him. It's then that he finally got a good look at the four of them, 3 boys and a girl that seemed to be the leader. It's nice to see you again, Miss Sasuke, Maiko said, stepping forward to give a small bow. The rest quickly lined up as Maiko pointed the rest of them out. The tall is Takeru, short Steph over there is Ishida. That one staring is Karen, and me, as you know, I'm Maiko. The rest of them all stood beside Maiko as she gave another bow, and they did the same. Aren't you supposed to be training? Sasuke immediately asked, jumping the pleasantries. The 4 Genins froze up and Maiko instead stepped forward, We were supposed to be but our sensei said he had to go out. Sasuke put two and two together, so not only Kakashi and some other shinobi had gone out but a lot of them had left. Maiko was watching Sasuke deep in thought and came up with an idea. Miss Sasuke? She asked cautiously. Yes. Maiko fiddled on her feet and glanced back at the other Genins, then turned back to Sasuke. Can we stay with you for today? He glanced around then pointed at himself in disbelief. This hadn't been part of his plan and he had no clue how he could pull it off. Yes, the four Genins said in unison. Sasuke started running through his options and all of them turned out bad, but he knew having Genins around him would help bolster his cover. Fine. Stick close, he said, turning around, proceeding with his walk. He didn't have a particular destination in mind and trying to find Kakashi would be a bad idea. He thought to himself it would be suicide to follow an S-rank shinobi into a mission. He may have been proud but he wasn't stupid. Maiko was walking next to Sasuke and was constantly glancing up at him every few seconds as he kept his eyes forward. Something on your mind, Maiko? He asked, startling her. Nothing, Miss Sasuke. I was just wondering, could you show us some moves you can do? He ran through all the moves he could do in his head and settled on a few that most Genin wouldn't know. Well, I might as well have fun with this. I know a couple. Would you want to know? Maiko nodded vigorously before stopping after something had popped into mind for her. Miss Sasuke? She asked nervously again, but this time Sasuke looked down at her as she spoke. Where is your team? He flinched for a second. He hadn't thought they would ask that. Well, I don't have one, as you can see. He looked at Maiko for a reaction and was surprised to see her smiling before she was shoved out of the way by Teika. Really? He shouted, getting in really close. Maiko immediately kicked him back into the rest of the boys, who swiftly dodged out of the way, letting him hit the floor as they kept walking. Sorry about that, Miss Sasuke. Sasuke just cracked a small smile at the exchange that reminded him so much of his own team. They arrived at some training field, different from the ones that he went to with his team, just to make sure he wouldn't run into anyone he knew. Luckily for him, Konoha was a big place and there were more than enough spots from him to just disappear into the shadows. Once there, he looked around. He could show them a few moves that he knew, as he was exceptional for his age and just a few years older than the Genins following him, so if he didn't show them something special they would see through his lie. So how good is your fire jutsu? He asked, trying to gauge just how good they were. Maiko stepped back shyly. Seems she's not so good there, but Karen stepped forward with Isha next to him. They both put out their hands as a flame started to flicker in their hands, till it burst into a small full flame, and held their hands out towards Sasuke. How is that, Miss Sasuke? Karen asked with a small smile on his face. Sasuke could hear Teika scoff in the background and Maiko muttering under her breath whilst looking away. It's not that impressive a way, but on the contrary, it was quite impressive even to Sasuke how these two could keep their flames this stable at this age. That's quite impressive. You too. Karen looked over his shoulder to Maiko and Teika, sticking out his tongue mockingly, but it could use a lot of work, Sasuke immediately said, forcing Karen to drop his smile and Maiko to get one of her own. He flicked his hand at them as a sign to step back and they did as they were told. If you can work hard at it you can do this, he said as he blasted a fireball at a tree. It wasn't enormous, I kept it small scale to show you just how much you can do. Maiko nodded enthusiastically, moving to step beside Sasuke. That was amazing, Miss Sasuke. Do you think you can teach me how to do that? He gave a slow nod. I could teach you that and more, but are you sure you can handle it? After showing Maiko the basics of what he had learned from Kakashi and using it as if it was his own knowledge, he decided to lean into it more. Maiko showed Sasuke how she was progressing with her chakra control, and it wasn't much, but he could see she was a quick learner, might be even on par with Adobe. He made them do many workout routines, most that he couldn't do himself but had seen Itachi do when he was younger, and some that Kakashi had put him through. Sasuke made sure to never be directly involved but to always have a sort of director role as he told them what to do. Too close and they might realize he was not as powerful as he was coming off. Watching the Junins do some of the exercises that he remembered Itachi doing left a bad taste in his mouth, but he could stomach it because he knew it worked, which he didn't want to think about. Okay, that should be all today, Sasuke said, getting up from his comfortable position from under a nearby tree and walking to the Junins. They were all sweating and breathing frantically. Maybe giving Anbu exercises to them was a bit much. He didn't want to admit it, but he was very impressed because they got through most of the exercises with little to no complaining. The few that had been there were quickly silenced by Maiko. Their teamwork was definitely better than his team, even with them being an odd number for how they were. A 4-person strike team was very effective. Do you have to get back to Kakashi-sensei, Miss Sasuke? Maiko asked after taking a deep breath and looking up. She was met with a scrunched up face from Sasuke, who was just deeply disgusted. What did you say about Kakashi? Maiko quickly backpedaled as best as she could. It's just you stay at Kakashi-sensei's house. So I thought. He put his hand up again to silence her. No, me and Kakashi are not like that. We're comrades, he said, not really understanding himself either. Really? He heard a shout from Maiko before confirming with a nod. Maiko just thought to herself, is that what adults call it these days? Takehiro pushed forward again, stepping in front of Sasuke way too close, to which he thought enough is enough and swiftly kicked Takehiro's feet from under him. Takehiro landed hard on his back. Ow ow ow. The 3 other Junins immediately started laughing as Sasuke had a smug smirk on his face. Maiko stepped forward. And that's why you respect a girl's personal space, she said before turning to Sasuke. Miss Sasuke, what do you like to do? What do you like to eat? He raised his hand before she could continue. Don't forget to breath when you speak. She gave him a nervous nod before waiting expectantly. He really didn't want to train today, and lazy days like these rarely came for him on his quest for vengeance. As Maiko waited, Takehiro got up slowly and silently, but saw that Sasuke was watching him sneak up behind Maiko before reaching out. He didn't know what happened, but he soon found himself on the ground on his back, hurting even more. Sasuke was beyond surprised to see that Maiko, a Junin, could use such advanced dodging jutsu that he still couldn't tell what went on. Feeling Sasuke's stare, Maiko turned around and stood in front of Sasuke expectantly. He waited for a while before it slowly clicked that she wanted to be rewarded for her act of dodging. He didn't have anything on him, so he went for what Kakashi always said to Naruto when he didn't want to go buy him ramen as a reward. Maiko felt Sasuke's hand pet her head softly as if doing it for the first time. She didn't really think about it as she was more in the mind of enjoying her reward. At that moment Sasuke's stomach growled and everyone stopped and stared. Miss Sasuke. Are you hungry? Karen asked after helping Takehiro up. Now that he thought about it, Sasuke hadn't eaten since morning, so he gave a slow nod and pointed in the direction of a nearby stall. There were always stalls near training fields because they knew people coming from training would always be hungry. It helped that the thing that had attracted him to this stall, in particular, was the smell of smoked tuna. As he ate his food, he didn't notice Maiko staring at him as he savored his food. She likes smoked tuna, she noted to herself for later use. After hanging out for a few more hours with the Junins, asking as many questions about Sasuke as possible, which he answered sometimes, and telling him about themselves as they were on their walk home, they all stayed in generally the same directions, so it wasn't much of a problem, and Sasuke had managed to keep his cover. He gave them some goodbyes after they had annoyed it out of him. saying they wouldn't leave till he said it back, and he eventually relented. After a few moments he was now by the front door, and then he caught sight of something he wasn't expecting. Blood. They were handprints of blood on the door frame, and as he slowly pushed the door inside, he saw Kakashi's prone form on the floor with some blood splattered around him. He felt his blood run cold as the sight vividly reminded him of the night his family was slaughtered. As he slowly reached out with a shaky hand after getting on his knees, as his hand slowly reached towards the head to turn him around, Kakashi's hand shot up as he opened his eyes to look around. What he saw was something that he was not expecting. Sasuke had tears running down his cheeks and was shaking, eyes wide as if having seen a ghost. It wasn't hard for Kakashi to make the connection. With a pained grunt he forced himself to sit up. He held his side with his left hand and reached out to Sasuke, who seemed to have been frozen with the sight. Sasuke didn't resist as he was pulled into a one-armed hug, and he could hear Kakashi grunting in pain as he held him. He wrapped his arms around Kakashi tightly and buried his face into his neck, ignoring the pained grunts that he let out. There was a time for that later. Kakashi held him for a while but slowly pushed him back to look at his face. He could still see the tear stains and some of the fresh tears that were still there. With his thumb, he slowly stroked all the tears away before pulling Sasuke back into a deep hug again. "Don't worry, I'm still here," he whispered into his ear as he slowly stroked his hair and leaned their heads against each other. After a while, Sasuke had calmed down and was breathing steadily but not letting go of Kakashi, as if doing so he would drift off. "As much as I would like to keep this going, we do have a dinner to get to," he whispered into Sasuke's ear and gave him another slight squeeze before slowly releasing. Sasuke pulled away. His face was clean now, but it was obvious to anyone with a keen eye that he had been crying. "So you want to tell me what happened?" Sasuke asked, looking over Kakashi's body that he was supporting in his arms, stopping him from lying down on the floor again. "Well, I used too much chakra and got the shit beat out of me ... but I won, so that's something," he said with a small chuckle that Sasuke reciprocated. "Well, since I know you won't tell me, it won't matter for now, but we need to get ready for Mrs. Misuno ... Are you sure you can go?" "Yes, I can go," he said, trying to get up but remaining trapped in Sasuke's arms that were wrapped around his chest. "Might have to use a soldier pill." The Uchiha had heard of these pills. They would temporarily increase your chakra, stamina and energy, but the crash was said to be horrible. "We can just cancel." Kakashi shook his head no and reached for a pill in one of his pockets. "Mrs. Misuno is looking forward to this and she could use the company ... just to ease her worries a bit." He took out the pill and held it in front of his face before swallowing it in one go. His body jerked around a bit, which only made Sasuke hold him tighter till he calmed down and was once again breathing normally. "I should probably clean myself up," Kakashi said as he got up with Sasuke helping him up, arms still locked around him. Sasuke glanced around his chest to the other side of the room, where he could still make out the bag with the kimono inside that hadn't been moved. At the same time, Kakashi finally got a good look at what he was wearing. "So what's with the change of clothes?" Sasuke glanced down at himself. "Oh I wanted to walk around a bit and didn't want to draw too much attention." Kakashi nodded in acceptance. "Sounds smart ... You don't have to wear the kimono if you don't want to," he added, remembering how Sasuke had essentially thrown it in his face the day before. "I'll wear it. You kind of got your blood all over this one," he said, glancing down at himself once again. Alright, let's get to it." Sasuke finally let go of Kakashi uneasily. He didn't want to appear weak, but the sight of Kakashi on the floor had really thrown him off. Without further word he moved past Kakashi, knocking him lightly on his side as he did, and went to grab the bag with the kimono. He gave one last glance at Kakashi to see him already working on his wounds, wrapping some with bandages and applying some healing jutsu to others, but he could still see the pain twitches he let out with some of the wounds. After composing himself, he stepped into what was now his room to change. After Kakashi had cleaned himself up and washed up to get rid of the smell of the blood of himself, he stepped into the lounge wearing yet a different pair of his same get-up. If she asks, just say a ninja always has to be prepared. He had been hearing annoyed grunts coming from Sasuke's room for a while, and they had died down moments ago, which brought him the assumption that he was done. There was an audible sigh as the door finally opened and Sasuke stepped out, shyly looking away. Kakashi's breath hitched in his throat for a moment as the way Sasuke was acting reminding him so much of Rin and her stubborn attitude and how she acted when Obito had asked her out to the Konoha festival all those years ago. The blue kimono went down, almost touching the floor by a few inches but hiding Sasuke's feet, and the white leaf prints all over it matched the color of his skin. His hair was not tied together but set free as it always has been, which reminded him of his mom. He didn't have his ninja plate after having chosen not to wear it since his punishment started. He shifted around, throwing glances at Kakashi nervously. "So?" he asked his sensei as the silence was getting to him. Kakashi didn't know what to say, so he just nodded before moving past Sasuke and walking to the armory. In the armory he looked around and found the drawer he was looking for. He opened it and saw 3 ninja bands that belonged to him, Obito and Rin back in the day. He closed it, then opened another where there were many ninja headbands that he always kept, as sometimes he would lose them on missions. After looking at all the freshly minted ones, he picked one out and walked back out to Sasuke. The Uchiha was waiting restlessly till he saw Kakashi walk out with a ninja band in his hands that looked like new. "What's with that?" he asked, but his sensei was already reaching out to wrap it around his head, just making it more convincing, he said before he stepped away again to fully take in Sasuke's form again. Now the look is completed. Sasuke didn't know how to feel about getting something that he didn't turn himself, but the logic behind him wearing it made sense. He reached up to touch it, feeling along all of its indents. "Well, let's get going." They made the trek to Mrs. Misono's house in silence, but not the usual uncomfortable one, as this one was mutual, and before long they were standing at the front door of Mrs. Misono's house. After Kakashi gave a small knock, they both waited, anxious, nervous, but that was quickly dissuaded after Mrs. Misono came rushing to the door. "Kakashi and Miss Sasuke, it's so good to see you," she said, rushing to immediately hug Sasuke. He tried to back away, but a hand on his lower back pushed him forward, pushed him unexpectedly, causing him to more or less fall into the hug. "Well, aren't you eager?" Mrs. Misono exclaimed, hugging him tighter as he turned his head to glare at Kakashi. She pulled back and looked him up and down. My, you look stunning," she said with a large smile on her face, turning to give a nod to Kakashi. "Well, you did something right. Why don't you come in?" She grabbed Sasuke's hand and dragged him inside, and Kakashi slowly followed till they got to the large table that had been set up. Mrs. Misono pulled out Sasuke's chair and forced him to sit down and motioned for Kakashi to sit next to him as she took a seat at the head of the table. "You know, Kakashi, you could have dressed up a bit," she said as she sat down, glancing at him. He let out a nervous chuckle. "Oh, you know, Mrs. Misono is Shinobi always has to be ready," she scoffed when she heard that. Yes, but that means you mustn't skimp out on yourself. Life is too short for that." Sasuke glanced around the room to various images that graced the lounge till one caught his eye. It was a woman and a man with short white hair holding a child's hand, a child that seemed to be wearing a mask. He knew who it was but decided not to ask, as bringing such topics to dinner seemed disrespectful. "Now let's dig in it. Tadakimasu," they all said in unison. "I made a lot, so be sure to eat up as much as you can, especially you, Sasuke. I saw that you were only skin and bones the other day." Sasuke wanted to retort, but a swift finger jagged to his sides cut him off before he could, and he just turned his head to glare at Kakashi, who looked innocently on. As he was glaring at Kakashi, Sasuke's mouth gaped open as something that he never expected happened before his eyes. His sensei, slowly sitting in his seat, slid down his mask till it was around his neck and looked across the table at Mrs. Misono before giving each other a curt nod. Sasuke remembered having tried to see what he looked like under the mask because he had been so adamant to keep his identity hidden, well as hidden as he could be with white hair. Noticing Sasuke's stunned glare, Mrs. Misono called out to him, "Sasuke dear? Is something the matter?" He quickly composed himself before bringing his focus back on his food. Mrs. Misono kept her eyes on him as he kept giving glances over to Kakashi, who was happily enjoying his food with a small smile. "Oh young love," she thought to herself, as they ate their food course by course. Sasuke was starting to notice Kakashi being unsteady and letting out small grunts when he moved. Then he remembered that the soldier pill was probably starting to wear off and the more than hour-long interrogation by Mrs. Misono had eaten into their time. Mrs. Misono had welcomed him so openly before and practically begged him to be with Kakashi, but had grilled him with questions, even threats that the Uchiha found amusing. This old woman was so fiercely defensive of Kakashi that she seemed as if she would defeat the Hokage herself if it was ever in a way to help him. Sasuke had a feeling he knew why from what Kakashi had said of Mrs. Misono's relationship with his father. She probably was the last remaining family, even if they had no relation. She had probably made a promise to always watch over him to his father. But the main question he had was why Kakashi felt comfortable enough to remove his mask here. After all, from what he had heard from the both of them, their relationship had been strained for a while. He remembered how Kakashi had said this dinner was important to Mrs. Misono, but he also thought it probably was for Kakashi as well, as he had never seen him so carefree. Even in his own house he wore his mask, but here he was different. Sasuke knew he had to make the excuse, and he tried to be as polite as possible to get the least resistance. "Mrs. Misono, it's been a wonderful dinner, but we have to get going now. It seems Kakashi had a very tiring day." He hated how his voice sounded when he used this form, but now it was more than necessary. He could tell Kakashi was barely holding it together as he had slowly put on his mask. It seemed Mrs. Misono knew that their dinner was over too as she saw him do this, but she wasn't bothered as she considered this a success. After a few more words of courtesy at the door and both Kakashi and Sasuke being pulled into massive hugs, they said their goodbyes and started walking down the street. As they walked, Sasuke glanced back at Mrs. Misono, smiling until he saw her go back inside. He heard those words as he saw the form of Kakashi falling to his side and rushed to grab him using all the strength he could muster at the moment. After looking around and making sure no one had seen that, he glanced to Kakashi, who was now cradled in his arms as knelt on both knees on the ground. After the training session he had with the Genins, he wasn't fully up to holding his sensei up for too long. "Damn, that kimono was expensive," he heard his sensei utter from behind his mask, which caused him to let out a small chuckle. "That's what you're concerned about?" Kakashi just shrugged and Sasuke let out a huff. "So we have a few options. Either I go call Mrs. Misono to drag you back to her house, cause carrying back will suck, or maybe I can wait with you, or I can leave you." He seemed to ponder on the last option more till he felt his forehead get flicked. "Are you supposed to be a shinobi? Carrying me back should be easy even in those clothes, unless ... you don't have that much chakra left ... Wait, what were you doing today in my clothes?" Sasuke just looked away. "Oh, I see. Were you impersonating a jonin? Clearly you wouldn't do that, Sasuke. You not dumb like Naruto and know the punishment for that, right?" he said, sarcasm dripping off every word. "Look, we can't go bother Mrs. Misono after she had such a great night, and waiting with me is a good way for the Hokage to find out I used soldier pills for something as small as a dinner, which is not good." He let out a deep breath. "And you know what I said about ninjas who abandon their comrades?" Kakashi saw the Uchiha mutter some curses under his breath before facing Kakashi, who was still squirming with each movement, pain very evident in his eye. After some struggling and curses being thrown both ways, Sasuke slowly stood up with Kakashi piggybacking on his back. Who uses a soldier pill for some freaking dinner, and now I have to carry this overgrown kid home? As if sensing him bad-mouthing him, Kakashi Longfinger flicked his forehead again. Focus, he whispered into his ear, sending shivers down Sasuke's spine as he more or less stumbled their way home. An hour later, a journey that was supposed to be completed in a few minutes finally ended as Sasuke stepped through the door, immediately dropping to the floor and Kakashi falling opposite him. He was gasping for breath, muttering over and over "never again," and Kakashi couldn't help but laugh, which only earned him a glare from the Uchiha. Seeing his death glare once again, Kakashi slowly stopped his giggles and then remembered his pain. He scrunched his face a bit, but Sasuke was smart enough to know he was still hurting from whatever had occurred later, which he would have to find out. 10 minutes after both of them had been laying on the floor, Sasuke slowly got up and crawled over to Kakashi, still unsure of his own strength. "We need to get you to your room," Sasuke said, taking slow breaths as he looked over Kakashi, and he twitched with some touches he made to his torso. Whatever had happened, it wasn't pretty. "First time I'll ever have a girl in my room," he joked, immediately earning himself a punch to the stomach that wasn't very strong, but with all the pain he was already in that he definitely felt it. Without another word, Sasuke slowly but shakily got to his feet and soon after slowly pulled Kakashi up, slinging his left arm over his shoulders. One more push. Their relatively short trek to his bedroom seemed way more demanding, and Sasuke could already feel himself slipping. The hinge was only adding to his tiredness. Even in his tired state, he paused when he opened the door to Kakashi's room. The first thing he noticed was a Nambu mask and much more, but it all seemed very blurry to him at the moment as he stumbled over to the bed. With a heave, he chucked Kakashi on his bed before falling in right with him. He definitely wanted to get out of there, but the bed was just so inviting and he could feel his will to get up, slowly leaving. This was one of the rooms he had been so desperate to explore, and now that it was within his reach with Kakashi seemingly sleeping behind his closed eye, he couldn't get up. Sasuke slowly started raising his right hand from his laid down position before it was swiftly grabbed. He slowly turned his head to who he knew to be the suspect as his arm was brought back down, but Kakashi held it for good measure as Sasuke slowly succumbed to sleep.